Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Ramirez, and welcome to the Hit List Podcast, a podcast where me and a guest cross off films from our watch list and discuss them. This is Season 5, Episode 5. Today, I'm joined by someone I've been following on Instagram because of their aesthetic and for their love for film noir. He's a writer, he's a cinephile just like me, and everyone, please give a warm welcome to Alex Vlahov.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Welcome, welcome. Before we get started, I have two questions for you, just a little icebreaker.
Sure.
First one is, whenever you sit down and watch a movie, do you stick to your favorites or watch something new?
I try to watch something new. I rarely rewatch unless I love the film. And then if I love the film, I'll have seen it like 5 times. But mostly I try to expand and keep churning over the soil, keep it fresh, you know?
Yeah, awesome. My second question for you, I kind of asked the same. I try to do like a different icebreaker each episode, but I like this question from the last episode with Rebecca. So my question for you is, what's something about you that people would be surprised to know?
What's something about me that people would be surprised to know? I lately, in the last year or so, I've gotten really into going out into the desert. So I'm on the West Coast out here. LA is really close to a lot of desert territory, and I like finding petroglyphs or pictographs, like indigenous Native American rock art, old carvings or paintings, centuries old, and finding them, going out deep into Joshua Tree usually, and finding these sacred grounds just to take a photo, be very respectful. I just find it incredible that humans have been have had this impetus, this drive to tell stories or relate their existence through art on cave walls, boulder faces, against rock slabs for centuries. And often, sometimes the meaning is lost. But so I guess the fact about me is I will venture into the desert with just like my phone as a GPS. I always let everyone know where I'm going ahead of time because, stuff can happen out there. Yeah. But, I really like exploring on my own out in the desert when it's not like crazy hot season, like not May to August. But, that's like kind of a weird new thing I've gotten into since moving back down to LA is exploring just the weird parts of the human history in the desert, even mines. Abandoned Model Ts. That's one of the fun parts of living down here.
That's really cool. I never would have thought about that. So I'm very glad I asked that question. I'm going to keep that question for the next person who comes on.
It's a great question. It's great. I love that you didn't tell me. So it's a very honest response because if I knew ahead of time, I might have, tried to sound clever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's maybe a fun fact about me. I think people might not know. Yeah.
That's the thing about Icebreaker is that I was one of the rare kids who didn't dread icebreakers because I wanted to get to know my classmates, even for until college, I love the icebreakers. The thing I didn't like about icebreakers is when you're the first one to answer the question, what's your purpose in life? I don't know.
Dude, I also love when people have really boring icebreaker facts. They're not really facts. They're like, well, I'm kind of kooky. I like football. You know what I mean? I'm kind of a crazy guy. I saw Space Jam 2 with my wife. It's like, okay, that's just come on. That's not even a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have advice for people who are like leaders of clubs or school clubs or trying to be like an adult, like introduce people to each other or whatever. If there's like a small group of people and they don't know each other very well, try 2 truths and a lie. It's a very good icebreaker. It'll get you talking for like probably hours if you don't stop them, It's a very good one. So 2 truths and a lie is a very good one if it's a small group of people. If it's a large group of people, there's one that we always use for like this other scholarship group I was a part of. Who was your celebrity crush when you were like 5 years old? It's a unique one.
Yeah, something simple. Like, what do you think of O.J. Simpson? Something very simple, non-controversial. No, just... In a large group, yeah, I can just imagine. No, I totally hear you. I mean, I there's the basic ones that like I already have like immediate responses to just from Lifetime of like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite song? It's nice to have those in the back pocket. Yeah.
Definitely.
What's kind of annoying is when someone just doesn't know and takes so long deciding. It's not annoying. It's more just kind of like, yeah, it's like come on, you've been asked this before at some point, but or just say something. It's not like it's. That's fine. I'm not getting grumpy about it. It's just like, it's kind of boring to wait there and see. And eventually it's like blue. It's like, oh well, okay, that's not a controversial decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
But I don't want to get too sidetracked with the icebreaker questions.
for
I want
sure.
to talk about the topic for this movie, for this podcast about movies. The film we'll be discussing today is Murder by Contract, released in 1958. Murder by Contract is a 1958 American film noir crime film centering on an existentialist hitman assigned to kill a woman. The film is directed by Irving Lerner and stars Vince Edwards, Philip Pine, Herschel Bernardi, and Caprice Toriel. This film was on Alex's list. Alex, why was this film on your list?
I'm going to be honest. I don't remember where I first heard it recommended. It had just always been floating around. I really am interested in the noirs at the end of the classic period. So a lot of people consider the golden noir era to be from 1940 to 1960. If you're getting really specific about it, some people will even say it's just The Maltese Falcon, 1941, to Touch of Evil, 1958. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's a little too the parameters. I just like 1940 to 1960 as like a general overview. Anything after being neo-noir, anything before proto-noir or influence. Those 2 decades is where you find most of them. And the 50s ones are bizarre because you'll note they really start competing with TV. They really start like trying to get people away from the easy, cheap, somewhat tawdry entertainment. Also, the Hays Code censorship is sort of slowly being chipped away by the 50s. So by the end of the 50s, you get very suggestive scenes that they never would have dreamed of in the 40s. I mean, there's this interesting thing when World War II ended. Suddenly studios were allowed to have dark endings, right? Because during wartime, why would you be telling these negative, pessimistic, downbeat stories for a public trying to support the war effort, So suddenly, all these films, especially post-war, have dark, really depressing finales. And people kind of point to this as one of the trends in noir. So by the 50s, it all just gets exaggerated. The murders are weirder. The costumes are more suggestive. Things might be just more perverse than they were. It's all just sort of turned up to 11 by the late 50s. So I was particularly interested in that this title was from that era.
So you also gave me a list of like 3 films you wanted to choose for this film. You gave me like kind of like the final decision. The reason why I chose this one is because its tagline on the poster is "Murder is double for women because women are double the trouble," something like that. And I just thought that was the most hilarious tagline. I was like, I have to see this. And I'm glad I chose this film because it was unlike what I thought it would be, in the sense that it's more philosophy to it than I expected it to be from like 1950s film noir. I'm more used.
Hey, it's still gonna have those misogynist marketing touches.
It is,
Yeah.
Yeah, and
but no,
yeah.
yeah. Sorry, but I know what you're saying in that like a good a tagline with a hook. Oh man, yeah. Some of them are like, I mean, the most famous one in Alien, "In space, no one can hear you scream." I mean, some of them go beyond the poster themselves. So it's really funny that's what really caught you on this one. That's awesome. That's a cool. Do you remember what the other ones I suggested were by any chance?
I think one of them was the Pink Flamingo.
Oh yeah. That's written by a famous. It's based on a novel from a famous author who also wrote "In a Lonely Place," I believe. Pink Flamingo Road.
Yeah, Flamingo Road, Shack Out
That's
on
it. Yeah.
Shack Out 101, or Murder by Contract.
Oh, Shack Out on 101, I think, is a Lee Marvin film. You chose a really good one. Yes, it is a Lee Marvin film. No, you chose a really good one. I really enjoyed Murder by Contract. I thought it had touches that felt modern. It has sort of this like hangout quality, like when he's in LA. It sort of has this like slow, meandering, conversational. You said philosophical, right?
Yeah, in the sense that like when he's talking to one of the assigners, like I guess one of the hitmen they're not hitmen, they're basically people who are hired to like kind of like watch him. He's talking about like murder, but like if murder is committed by a soldier during wartime, is that really still considered murder? It's just like the basic conversation you have with each other, like when you're like in middle school or high school, and like basic philosophy or whatever. Like, when is murder murder, and when is murder like a soldier doing his duty, something like that. And I was like, oh, this is quite the dialogue for this one dude who who's a hitman, who's doing this for like as a job, who seems to be having doubts about this job as well.
Mm.
So,
Oh, I just want to correct myself. That Flamingo Road is not written by Dorothy B. Hughes. But she's a fantastic writer. In a Lonely Place is based on her work. Flamingo
okay.
Road it's directed by Michael Curtiz though, and I think that's what I'm getting confused because of the Bogart of it all. But yeah,
Gotcha.
Flamingo Road is another one I've always wanted to see. But yes, those conversation moments, long conversations.
Yeah.
Long sort of. There's the one in the car with his two handlers, and then he has one at the end with that sort of the blonde flame, where she reveals that she isn't actually dead. Not to give spoilers for a movie from 1958. Yeah, but there's like it struck me. It's so odd that there are these like two talk heavy sequences that you almost find in films that are adapted from plays at the time, which this is not at all.
No, this one is written directly for film.
Yeah.
Not adapted from a play whatsoever. That's something I'm also surprised by, because I'm the type of guy that watches like a bunch of action films. I've throughout this podcast, throughout watching these films, discussing my own favorite films and watching films that are on my list, I've learned that I watch very surface level films, where it's mostly like action, and they don't really go deep into the subject matter. And I realized I also don't go deep into the subject matter because I'm used to watching stuff that's like on a surface level. So as far as like something like this is something I would expect to watch for class, not just for like a film class, but it's something that, like I said, for ethics class as well, and maybe even for a psychology class as well, because like I said, he's a very much misogynistic man. Like there's inherent misogyny, as you might expect from a 1950s film from America. But the one I was really curious about was his hatred of women.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because it stems from his own trauma in the past. They don't go too much into it. They don't really need to, I guess. But I guess what my own thinking is that he was traumatized, maybe abused by an older woman in his life, and that's why he has, I don't want to say quote unquote triggered when he sees lipstick on a cup, which by the way, the waiter should not have given him a dirty cup. So I guess he was right to yell at him for a little bit.
That waiter, I felt so bad for him. I was just like, he is really, yes, lipstick on a cup sucks, but then the way that he like our protagonist like leans into him, it's almost like, okay dude, like it's not that, like he's speaking, like talking about like the quality of the waiter's personhood, and it's just kind of, it's like this schlubby older man. It's like, dude, he's not like, I don't know if I like the reading. That's interesting, the abuse. I see him as an incel, just another, you know what I mean, just another like frustrated white guy that was promised the world and can't live up to it. Like, sorry, but like that's a huge part of the incel like problem, is that like you grow up in a culture where like a lot of leads of TV shows and films look like you, i.e. Regular random white guy, right?
Yeah.
You're promised the world, and suddenly you realize that like you can't, like women don't like to be talked to like objects. You need to have some sort of skill, personality, some sort of something to get by in life. It's not just going to be granted to you. So they just blame everybody else and take their violence out on people. And this just seems like an incel film to me, made in 1958. That's what I found interesting about it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting interpretation of that. I didn't think of it like that, but it's good to like see the connections from today to back then. Yeah, it's something I could understand. And also the way he treats she's a call girl, right? The woman who invites to his room.
Yes.
Yeah, because I've heard sex workers. I've heard sex workers talk about like their own experiences, and they say usually the incels are like the worst people to talk to or worst people to service because they're inherently misogynistic and hate women. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny how. Yes, this is an influence on Scorsese, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. The big influence I saw from this was on Paul Schrader, who, I
Mm.
mean, Paul Schrader wears his influences on his sleeve more. In fact, it's almost every film of his has like the protagonist writing in a journal reflecting on the woe of life. And he's talked about how the Bresson films, like Diary of a Country Priest, um, what an influence they are on him. So you see this character monologuing to themselves in Taxi Driver. You see it in Light
Mm.
Sleeper. You see it in First Reformed. Someone writing in their journal or having a voiceover about their view on the world, that's like the Paul Schrader cliche. He grew up in, I think, Dutch. He grew up in, I have it right here, a Dutch Reformed church.
Mm.
Very religious background. He didn't even watch a movie, I believe, until college. So,
Wow.
yeah. So you think about a character like Travis Bickle, and yes, that comes from Paul Schrader's background and living in like also this the 70s New York. That is an experience as a thing out there. But this film also seems to feed into that. There's like this like lineage of, and then there's all these films from these Laurie Anderson films from England, the angry young men films. There was this cinematic trend. There's this through line of pissed off protagonists that just want to let the world quote unquote burn, to use a cliche. And it's just surprising to see one as early as 1958.
Definitely, for sure. So there's one scene I want to talk about in particular because it's just so I don't even have the right word for it. It's when that's my dog. Hold on. Let me get it
Oh,
real
no
quick.
problem. Yeah, no problem.
The scene I want to talk to you about is when he takes his first kill in the movie. In the movie, he takes a assignment from an employer to kill two men. The first one is a barber. The second one is some person in the hospital. The one in the barbershop scene, it looks amazing. Just like it has all the rules of like suspense from Alfred Hitchcock, where you can see the very first thing you see are typed up men in a closet, and they're like barbers. And then you see like a client come in, and he's just like treats it like a normal day. He doesn't know the danger that he's in, and you see the protagonist who is sharpening a razor on the leather tool right next to him. And then afterwards, he closes the blinds, and there's like this little loopy thing. I don't know what it's called. It's like a barbershop pole, whatever. And it says, "You're next." And
Oh,
all
that's
the
yes. Love that. Love that.
everything about the scene, like you know exactly what's gonna happen. You just feel more tense as it happens. They don't show the murder on screen.
No.
They don't show any blood. It's just suggested, and it's over. The second scene, he goes to a hospital and just like suffocates a man. That's okay. That's here or there. But the first scene, it's just the buildup of tension, the buildup of suspense. Like you know what's gonna happen. The victim doesn't know. That's like all the rules of that, like a suspense that Hitchcock likes, and you see on screen how it works so well.
Well, you know what's funny is that Hitchcock is so careful, and this feels just kind of like it just cuts to them on the floor. Like it
Right.
kind of fades and then it fades back to him, and it's so incidental. You know, it almost feels like they shot some random, like they got B-roll of the murder and then just kind of hobbled it together. You're right,
Yeah.
they don't actually, they never show the violence. Very rare do they show the violence.
Yeah.
Um, the spinning barbershop pole, I think that goes back to when barbers did bloodletting, which is like not even around anymore. I mean, it's what killed George Washington. It's like letting out blood to relieve the symptoms of the pain for a patient. The only reason, if I'm remembering my history correctly, that bloodletting worked is because you lose so much blood that it gets you high, like you get lightheaded. But barbers at one point did that. So that those red and blue poles, I believe, are to like have a leftover from that when they used to do
Mm.
that, and now it just means barbershop, right? But you're absolutely right, pointing out the you're next. That's a very clever, simple, elegant way to tie in the. He kind of just starts right away. Also, before he goes out to L.A., it's all so easy. He get,
Yeah.
kills the people in the barbershop or has them tied up. Kills that one guy. Kills the one guy in the hospital. It's all made to look so simple with such panache, and then the minute he's sent out to the sunny coast of no problems, It's really difficult for some reason.
So yeah, when he goes to LA, he stalls. Like he spends like the week just doing a different activity each different day. Just like takes his time throughout the whole thing. He's like, nah, we got plenty of time. We're good. And then once it gets to him finally learning about like his mark, and it's a woman, and he learns that she's closely guarded by police because she's a witness in a crime that his employer was involved in. It gets much more difficult. He's like, oh no. So my question to you is, we eventually know his fate. We know his thoughts, quote unquote, about like what he's thinking about. Do you think he intentionally stalled on purpose? Not just because he wanted to like see if the handlers had any tails on them. Do you think he intentionally did that on purpose?
So, okay, that's a really great question. My reading on it is that he is taking advantage of the situation.
Mm.
That he is. Did you ever see what was that Brad Pitt movie about murder contractors?
Killing them softly?
Killing Them Softly. One of James Gandolfini's last movies, right? Do you remember James Gandolfini's character in that?
So I know the title. I haven't seen the film though.
It's a good movie. That character, James Gandolfini plays this hitman who comes into town who kind of is a little bit bloated and past his prime and might be criticized for spending too much on food service and prostitutes and not really getting the job done, right? So it's like, if I remember correctly, there's a scene in the morning when he's supposed to be doing the hit. He's like still in the hotel room partying, drinking, hanging out, right? So this really reminded me of that, of like a hitman who's kind of like a good time Joe and doesn't really want to do it yet and wants to take advantage of this being bankrolled. That's how I read this. I also read this as, I'm a poor working class schlub. I've never had a vacation in my life. I'm going to take this for what it's worth. I'm going to write it all out to the end. I mean, some of the things he's asking them, he asked them to take him to the beach. He says at one point, I want to see the ocean. It's like, if you're on any job, even if it's not killing somebody, if you're sent somewhere for a job, you'd think that the first day you address something around the job. It really does feel like he's like taking them for a ride. And it's such a funny choice. He gets to LA and he's like, I want to do some sightseeing. Like, that is so funny to me,
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I thought, and I was a bit reaching in my thought process for this, like after watching the film.
There's no wrong answers in interpretation, hey.
I was thinking that maybe he knew this would be his last job, but he just didn't.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Because he had some, I don't want to say doubts, but like it just seemed like he was disinterested in doing it anymore, and it didn't matter who the next mark would be. And of course, like once he learns that it's a woman his next mark, he's even more anxious about it. So that's how I kind of viewed it as, like, he kind of knew it was gonna be like his last job. Whether he would have been alive or not after the job, I'm not sure if he knew that for sure.
Well, did you also notice, like, what's so funny about the noir genre? I mean, it's all kind of bullshit anyways. I mean, no one was making noir films at the time. Like, nobody was like, we're going to make a noir film. It's like, often these films were made and then afterwards considered.
They're classified as film noir.
Right, exactly. But the one thing a lot of these films have in common is that they're set in, like, dark urban environment, heavily at night, usually with silhouettes. This film, completely in the sunshine,
right?
All daylight, all LA. And then when it gets to like the part of him being unable to kill her, that almost feels like some sort of European comedy. Like, it's like there's that movie Divorce Italian Style, which I believe is like the husband constantly trying to murder the wife or see that she dies. In order to like get out of the marriage. And then also there's that Elaine May film with Walter Matthau, A New Leaf. So like there's this old-timey comedy concept of like, just Looney Tunes, dude. Right. Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Like, there is very much like an Elmer Fudd Bugs Bunny thing going on with him trying to kill her and it never working out. But the film doesn't play that. It's deadly serious and sober. But he's like touring LA and unable to kill his mark. It's funny in a weird way.
Definitely. I that's how I viewed it as well. And that's what I think is like the best part of some films where they take themselves so seriously, they don't know they're being funny, but they're being funny. Where they try being like some people like they'll try to be funny because the whole movie is a comedy and it just doesn't work.
Mm.
It's like because they play it straight in this movie, right? Like it's I don't think they were self-aware enough to know that some things were a bit too silly, you know? Like for the part where we already discussed it a bit, like when he's like chastising the waiter, not the waiter, I guess like the bellhopper. I don't know. I thought, look, the way he just continued to monologue, like just like his frustration with the man, like he just kept going. Like, okay, is it done? No, he's keep going. Like, dude, you just talk about like life in general. Like, oh my gosh, you just disappointed this man's life. You're kind of projecting here, sir. And you're still going.
Yeah, yeah. That you find that a lot. The blustery sort of leading man. Also, what's interesting about this guy, he was a TV star, if I remember. Yeah,
Mm.
Vince Edwards. He was on a show called Ben Casey. So he was like my parents, maybe, but probably my grandparents more would know him as a doctor because he was like Ben Casey, like the Good Time Doctor on TV. For a long time. But his style, but what I really wanted to talk about is that there was this acting style that was kind of new that came out of New York theater. Brando and James Dean are like the often extolled examples. Dennis Hopper, in a way, afterwards. And Vince Edwards has a bit of that in contrast to a lot of the other actors in the film. He seems to be putting a bit more of like a modern touch on things, whereas the others, especially his two minders, do feel a bit more old school. So yeah, and that scene with the waiter, he does seem different. He seems to be acting different in those scenes, and I think it is influenced by this like new method, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right, so I had to ask you, what did you think of the ending?
Him being shot.
Yeah, like just like actually, let's talk about the whole sequence because it's just a very unique
It's
sequence.
erotic. It's very erotic. There's the shots of the eyes. There's the shots of the hands, of the piano. It reminded me of Third Man, ever so
Yes.
slightly.
Yes.
Did you get that? Also, even in
Yes.
the music too, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like
Yeah.
I heard the music. I'm like, I've heard this before, and then I saw later when you like mentioned Third Man. I'm like, yep, yep, exactly.
It's incredible how this jaunty, plucking, electric, cool guitar, low key jazz sound reminds me of the Zither score from Third Man, which I love. That's one of my favorite noirs, if you want to call it a noir, which I guess I do. That's one of my favorite films. And so him ending in that like underground tunnel section, I was like, oh my god, well this is how Third Man ends, literally. And then with her walking away and like the woman, quote unquote, being the survivor, that's also Third Man. There's a shot of her walking in the cemetery alone. Yeah, really enjoyed it. I mean, kind of inevitable. I was guessing he was going to die in LA. Especially, there's this irony of like, if he really got to it and found a way to do it quickly, he might have lived. But I think it's also part of his own ego and stalling that he ended up here,
Yeah, that's something that I found still kind of funny because like throughout the film, he made the point to like never carry a weapon, not even a knife, because they're illegal. Like he's just a civilian. Like if people ever stop him, he has nothing on him. He could just play the civilian card or play the tourist card. And he mentioned he got stopped a couple of times too. And he's like, oh, I'm just a tourist. And the cops had no reason to suspect him at all. Whereas in this part, when he goes through the sewer, he gets into the Mark's house, and he is right there. He is like right behind her. He unties his tie and is about to murder her, and he just can't do it. And then once he leaves, when he's getting away from the police, he finally has a gun to like use against the police. Mm-hmm. So I just found it like, I don't want to say I don't think the word is ironic. I'm not sure if it is, but I just found it funny. Like you could have gotten the gun to kill her, but you just didn't want to do it. You just wanted to do it your own way, I guess, because your ego. Stuff like that.
Yeah, they really make a big point out of this whole, he doesn't walk around with a gun. And I'm just kind of like, that's such an uninteresting, because we've seen, I think it's just from a modern audience perspective, it's like, that's fine. There's plenty of ways that one can commit these murders. It's like, the fact that he doesn't, it's like, oh, he doesn't walk around with a gun. And they make a really big deal of it, not only in the film, but in things written about the film. And it just doesn't really excite me. If anything, it's like, fine. I mean, there's films where it's like a strangler or a slasher, literally the slashers, you know? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so it's funny. It's like he says this as like this like mark towards his honesty and cleanliness. It's like you're still a killer, you know?
Honestly.
And yeah, a lot that minor classical music. It says here it's Bach, English Suite Number 2 in A minor.
Mm.
That's yeah. Apparently, it's also being played in Schindler's List. But yeah, that's what she's playing at the end. Love when classical music kind of finds its way into these films. And I think it also speaks towards her class. I mean, the house she's in alone, you know. There's a couple of noirs this reminded me of. It reminded me a little bit of The Long Goodbye, the idea of someone wandering around LA, trying to put things together. Except he's more of a detective. This is the bad guy, the antagonist. There's that Richard Gere remake of Breathless, where he's also kind of following a well-to-do woman, and this reminded me a little bit of that. There's two old noirs, Crime Wave and Tension, and this felt like Crime Wave and Tension to me just by using like real life LA locations. But yeah, while we're talking about like other parallels to the film other than Third Man from the ending, those other things kind of came to mind too.
I just keep feeling like the final shot is his hand coming out of the tunnel, just like laying lifeless right there.
Right. No. I mean, it's a great ending. A couple things that I wanted to point out is there's like a funny documentary feel in some sections. There is the guitar soundtrack is so cool and laid back. And from what I could find online, there was a really popular TV show called Danger, where the score was played by a jazz guitarist live each episode, which
Wow.
must have been very stressful just to like even get that done. Like live television, like live music or a TV show. But this apparently sounds like that show Danger. So apparently this was like a style at the time, sort of a laid back, just a guitar, electric jazz guitar.
Okay, awesome. So, do you have any other thoughts about like the film before I talk about like the production?
Let me see here if there's anything else that wasn't touched on. Funny that it's in Glendale. That's very much like a suburban area of LA now, not too far from me. It was just funny seeing Glendale. It's just very safe and like clean and not somewhere where you'd think murders would be happening. So it's just funny that that's where they end up. Oh, one thing that was pointed out in my research that I actually totally see, Sterling Hayden in the Asphalt Jungle has this like dream of like a getaway cabin, this idyllic rural cottage, this cabin, his like beautiful place, like this fantasy one day. I mean, one could argue that's like the Shawshank Redemption fantasy, the whole by the river, that like place, that like getaway spot where he'll finally meet each other, right? It's like
Right.
this idea of like the bad guy having this like little country cottage in the middle of nowhere as a dream. I love when that pops up, and this happens here. He does talk about his like, dream cottage. I love that it shows LA at night. It shows the grid, like if you go kind of high up in the mountains in LA at night, and you actually see it a lot in film, like Mulholland Drive, the David Lynch's film has a lot of this. You see like this like the glittering lights of LA, the circuit board of LA, and this film has that. And so I thought that was like an extra nice little point. The okay, so all the deaths are off screen, or you hear them. You hear a scream, right? How funny is it that eventually at one point they just wander onto a studio set? Remember that?
Oh yeah.
And like how easy that must have been for them. It's like, well, where do they go? Well, we could just literally shoot it behind this room that we're talking right now. You know what I mean? All they had to do was go outside to the back lot, and they didn't have to secure a location, didn't have to pay any permits, didn't have to deal with outsiders or be even inside. They're literally in the studio backlot, which must have been like, it's like the day they realized that must have been so like happy and easy. It's like, fellas, let's just do it right there. You know what I mean? Like, so that kind of made me laugh a little bit. It's just like the easiest decision they could make.
I want to talk about like the kill scene right here because
yeah.
I just found this so funny because like they're gonna kill this man with a gun, right? But they've never killed a man before, so they have no idea kind of like what they're doing. Like you have the basic idea. You shoot a man with a gun, he usually goes down dead. But they're leading him in this backlight towards like a secluded area, and the guy, he pretends to like faints. He feels sick. He's about to go down, And I guess these guys like still kind of care about him because one of them, like the guy with the gun, he goes there and he's like, hey man, you all right? And then he's like disarmed very quickly
Mm.
and just murdered with a rock, just being to death by a rock. And then he eventually catches the other guy, and that death is off screen as well. I just found that scene funny. Like it was
Yeah.
just so funny.
Yeah. I mean, those, especially considering those two bumbling men saw him as like such a thorn in their side. Yeah. I mean, with a rock is pretty brutal. Those as interesting characters too, like the taciturn, dour one that was giving the instructions, and the other one is sort of the come on, let's go, the negative one who is
Mhm.
like always against him. Is like a really good duo for like classic gangsters, and you see that a lot. Like one's a bit more patient, and one's kind of flying off the handle or a bit more emotional.
Right.
A famous example with almost like erotic undertones is the Big Combo, the two gangsters in that. I mean, it's kind of inferred that they're even in a relationship. I don't really see that here, but yeah, yeah. Again, as soon as the death happened off screen, I'm like, here we go again.
Now's the section where we talk about the production of the film, like what went into the film's making. Murder by Contract was directed by Irving Lerner from an original screenplay by Ben Simcoe, and at some point Ben Maddow, who had been nominated for an Academy Award for his screenplay for The Asphalt Jungle, did uncredited work on the script. He also went uncredited in several other notable films, including Johnny Guitar and The Wild One.
Johnny Guitar is a fantastic film. If you've
Okay.
never seen it, it's Nicholas Ray in his Rebel Without a Cause period. So it's like bright colors, great editing. Johnny Guitar is a fantastic film. Also has Sterling Hayden. And it's funny that you mentioned Asphalt Jungle, because if the same screenwriter did uncredited work on this, well, there you go. That explains that like gangster looking for the cottage. It's in both films, you know. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, yeah. Just like the fact that he's doing these jobs to get a house.
Hey man, the housing market's crazy these days, you know.
Yeah, must have been crazy back then too.
I know, but yeah, exactly.
So the film was shot in 7 days in February 1958 in Los Angeles, which always amazes me, like how you can get like close to an hour and a half feature film in just 7 days. That schedule must have been crazy just to get the locations and everything. As a filmmaker myself, I don't know how they did it. I really don't.
It's very impressive. I mean, 8 days, like 7 or 8 days, it is insane. It's absolutely insane with what she was able to, what they were able to accomplish. One thing I want to point out that I found really interesting is that it was shot by Lucian Ballard or Lucian Ballard. I think it's Lucian. He worked on like major films in old Hollywood. Worked with like every major director. Was infamously married to Merle Oberon, the actress, classic Hollywood actress. I think I know her best from Wuthering Heights. I believe she's British. But what I found interesting about their relationship is that she eventually burned herself like really, really badly from some accident. And Ballard developed a special camera just to light her, to kind of obscure her facial scars. Yeah. And whenever they worked together, like they'd like find a way to like sort of hide her scars or disguise them. But I remember learning that on some film for some noir like years ago, that Lucian Ballard is like this like really sensitive dude who's married to a famous actress and worked on all these films. So when I saw his name pop up, I'm like, oh, no wonder it looks so good. It has a fantastic DP.
That's awesome. I'm gonna look forward to that guy. So this movie was produced by Orbit Productions, and it was distributed theatrically in December 1958 by Columbia Pictures. And Columbia still holds the copyright for this film, dated October 1st, 1958.
Orbit was a Poverty Row. They had to be like a Poverty Row studio, which also makes sense why they shot it in LA. It does look a little cheap in some places, which makes sense. All those Poverty Row, Eagle, a lot of these studios that were not the big five, kind of rudely called Poverty Row. It definitely looks like one of their films.
Well, it still looks good. Like,
yeah.
And as far as like the influence and reputation, part of the film's reputation lies in its influence on director Martin Scorsese, who cites it as the one that has influenced his approach to filmmaking the most. And like you said earlier, it kind of influenced Taxi Driver as well, with like the main character and also how he's like with himself in the apartment. Well, that's what I
Hmm.
was thinking too. And he praised its quote economy of style and compares its ability to communicate ideas through cinematic shorthand to the work of Jean-Luc Godard and Robert Bresson.
Bresson came up. He came up earlier when we were talking about Paul Schrader. I mean, Diary of
Mm,
a Country Priest. Yep, I see. Sorry, it's Eagle Lion. The other Poverty Row studio that I know is Republic Pictures. And
okay.
Monogram a little bit, but mostly Eagle Lion and Republic. Eagle Lion put out like Detour, one of the most famous noirs of all time. Yes, Scorsese talked about seeing this with friends on a double bill with, like, I believe it was a Yul Brynner
Yeah.
western.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie had a huge impact on him, and he's talked about it. He's talked about it like since the '70s as like one of his favorite, for at least for a long time, as one of his like favorite films. You definitely see when he's alone in his apartment with the pool cube doing the sit ups. Or the pull ups. That all feels very Taxi Driver. That feels incredibly. And then the gangsters with personalities, the gangsters that are a bit like that just want to CLA or have their own preferences beyond just murder. That feels like Mean Streets, up to Goodfellas, up to Casino. You know, I can see how this is an influence on him.
Definitely. All right, so that's all I have on them. Do you have anything else that you also got from research?
Got a couple things. It was filmed at the Charlie Chaplin Studio in La Brea.
Mm.
Those, it says here that these are now A&M Records, which is where the We Are the World was recorded. Kind of a
Oh
funny
yeah.
fact. But I also know that Charlie Chaplin Studios, if you're ever in LA, you visit the site of the former Charlie Chaplin Studios. It's now Jim Henson, Muppet Studios.
Mm.
So there's a giant Kermit the Frog out front, and then there's a little doorway, and written in the cement is Charlie Chaplin's handprint and signature.
Wow.
They kept it. It's on La Brea. You can, I think it's La Brea. You can like, it's on the street. It's a very busy street, but you can like walk up to it and look at Charlie Chaplin's handprint still on this little slab of cement in front of where this was filmed. Now Muppet Studios. Now where they do all that stop motion puppet magic. So I thought that was kind of a cool fact. The guy that did the music was Perry Botkin Sr. I did not know him, but he did the music. He's most famous for. Do you know what TV show he composed the music for?
I'm gonna think Danger because you mentioned it.
No, Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh.
Very different style. Yeah. The actress Thelma Todd had a restaurant on the PCH, the Pacific Coast Highway, which is just Highway 1 out here. When they're on the beach, that little building in the background is Thelma Todd's restaurant, which, from what I understand, is like an old Hollywood hangout. I don't believe it's open anymore. Going into an LA gun shop. I mean, this is very different, but it reminded me of Pulp Fiction because so much of that third act is in an LA gun shop, like a weapon shop, the basement specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the music almost has this like, I know we mentioned Third Man, but it also sounds a bit like Italian pop. Like it's very like springy and jaunty and does not sound like what was like popular then, like the doo-wop of the time or even the popular jazz of the time. It's like how Elevator to the Gallows has that. I believe it's Miles Davis did the soundtrack. Has this like singular jazz soundtrack. It's haunting. It works. It's sparse. It also feels slightly John Waters-esque in its parody of the main guy. Because this guy, Vince Edwards, he's trying so hard to be this like cool dude, but he doesn't have it together because he's blowing up every second and he's saying dumb shit. But like you can see him, it's like it's almost this music is almost what it sounds like in his head of being a cool dude. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the slick back hair and his almost greaser style, and it's like I don't take guff from nobody. Like this almost sounds like the internal scoring soundtrack of what's like a cliche at the time of like a sort of a greaser style like this. He's not a greaser, but there's shades of it.
I'm thinking like kind of like in Spider-Man 3, like when Peter Parker has like the symbiote and he.
Oh, the cabaret.
Yeah, something like that where
yeah.
It basically makes him think what it embodies what Peter Parker thinks is cool, but he's really just dorky, you know.
For sure. No, I totally hear you there. Yeah, that's a man. I love that we were able to pull a Spider-Man 3 comparison out of this obscure 1950. That's awesome. Big fan of that. That's great. I'm looking at Irving Lerner. You know, it's funny. Irving Lerner. It looks like he directed a bunch of Ben Casey episodes. So he worked with, yeah, he worked with Vince Edwards again. Also, Ben Casey. From everything I find about it, its biggest cultural relevance is the opening symbol. Like, if you can somehow even work in the opening intro to the show Ben Casey, just the audio, it begins with like the symbol of man, woman, birth, death, infinity. And this was a very famous thing in the 60s. Like, if you just said things in that order, people would know you're talking about this. And it showed the symbols for each. But from what I can understand, that's like the most famous thing that people still remember from this random TV show. Just how weird and jarring the intro was. It's just funny that like a show can like end, and what the general public remembers about it, it's this bizarre like opening credit sequence. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, this is why people know Vince Edwards was the show. It shows like a schismed LA. It's this very flat landscape, and yet there's like so much tension of like waiting for him to like be done with sightseeing and waiting for this murder to happen. There's just like this sort of like low key tension in this alien landscape of like town, like you know, parts of the town that aren't even around anymore. I mean, LA looks very different now.
I bet.
Yeah, but that's about all that I had on the actual production side of it. And just that apparently the score influenced The Departed. The guitar pared down style. So there's another Scorsese connection. I mean, to be honest, I don't really remember the score of The Departed. I remember more just like random Rolling Stone songs roaring in the middle of nowhere. But yeah. I mean, I'm so glad that you chose this because I really enjoyed this bizarre little LA sunshine noir. One more thing I wanted to mention is that Lerner came from documentary. The director made a documentary on Toscanini. So there is this documentary sort of like laid back feel, sort of in their face at times. I love when a director has experience as a photojournalist, as a documentarian, because you see it in their work. Like John Huston is the most famous example when he made those like World War II propaganda films. Arguably even Kubrick. Like the Blank Check podcast talks about how once in a while in his films it'll go to handheld, and that's such a great contrast because it's alarming for the viewer, and it harkens back to this like simpler mode of filmmaking of just like being on the street, pointing the camera, clicking and going. You definitely get that feeling in this, and it's interesting to find out that Lerner does have a documentary background. It's not as like you mentioned Hitchcock in the beginning, and like yes, I see like the similar like tension threads to Hitchcock, but Hitchcock is very like set up, the camera's here, the actors move here. This film has like a looser quality, and when you find out that he did work in documentaries before is and that was very popular at the time too. It just makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to end this. Yeah. All right, so that concludes our conversation today. Thank you so much, Alex, for being here. I really learned a lot from our conversation today. You said a lot of names that I did not know any reference to, so I'm gonna look it up afterwards.
Oh, nice, man. Hey, always happy to throw some new stuff out there.
Awesome. So I'm gonna ask you: was Murder by Contract a hit or a miss for you?
It was a hit. It was a light hit. It was a light hit for me. Yeah, I found the meandering nature of it a little frustrating, but I also really appreciated it for what it was, and that there was really nothing else like this the year it was made. Just the conversational tone of angsty hitmen. I mean, it's very ahead of its time in that way. How about you?
I would say it's a hit. Like, it's not a miss for me. Kind of like you, it's a light hit. And I do see myself watching it again because I really enjoyed watching it. You know, it's just like a casual viewing type of film, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, man, totally. You mind if I ask what's another noir you like, or what in terms of the genre? Is there one that like that you hold above all others, or a couple films that you like?
So I don't want to say the first one I saw, but I guess like the first one I knew was a film noir because I kind of like knew what I was looking for was Double Indemnity, right? Because I watched it for film discussion class. Maltese Falcon was like okay for me. Like
That's how I feel too. It's kind of the classic. It's the one that I go back to least. It's not as exciting as the others, unfortunately.
yeah, I like most of like neo noir stuff, kind of like the Nice Guys, and what else?
For sure. No, there's tons of good neo noir. The '90s, especially. Yeah, there are fantastic neo noirs, even still being made. I mean, just a couple of years ago, Under the Silver Lake. It is a bottomless genre, and I'm not that picky with like defining this is a noir, this isn't a noir.
Yeah.
There are a couple trappings that usually it's a person against the system is like the easiest explanation. Someone who's kind of like fucked from the beginning, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I find a lot of its like socially progressive, cool aspects is this idea of like the system is corrupt, the cards are stacked against you. You often have to like turn away from legal means or societal means to achieve what you want. Also, it's very simply often about dumb people with a smart plan and it not really being able to be executed.
Yeah.
But I love Double Indemnity. Yeah, that's it. That house is around the corner from here. The house that I live in. Yeah.
That's cool. I guess the one I really like, I don't know why I just remember right now, is The Third Man. Because I'm a huge fan of Orson Welles, and just like the whole movie, I was just in love with. Like I used like some of the inspiration for it to like make a video I made back when I was learning how to make video, and to this day, it's like one of my most popular ones. And I guess Le Samurai.
Nice.
Le Samurai, I guess that counts.
Oh, Le Samurai is so good. Yeah, Alain Delon. Yes, that is a fantastic. That I would count it because it even though it's 67. It's definitely made like as an homage to Melville. Frequently, arguably, all of Melville's films, Jean-Pierre Melville, have these noir homages, even to the point where it feels awkward. It's like people would not be dressing like that,
Right.
The Last Seduction. That was the '90s neo noir. I was trying to remember. If you've never seen The Last Seduction, great film. Has Linda Fiorentino, who people probably know best from Men in Black. She's like the woman in Men in Black. This is before that. Yeah. Love The Third Man. I've been lucky enough to go to Vienna and ride that. What's it called? The circus wheel. So.
Oh yeah, the Ferris wheel.
Yeah. Oh, the Ferris wheel. Yes, it is horrifying. It is creaky. You're like, is this thing gonna break while I'm on it? But it's beautiful. It's so fun. And there's actually a movie theater in Vienna that plays Third Man. I think it's still open like every night. So if you're ever yeah, dude. So if you're ever that part of the world, you can actually go see Vienna. You can go see The Third Man in Vienna. So
I was thinking like maybe they also had like Before Sunrise there too, because that was shot in Vienna.
I always think that that's Paris, but you're right. It is Vienna, isn't it?
Yeah, Before Sunset's the one in Paris.
That's right. And then the last one's Greece, or
yeah, in Greece.
Right.
Awesome.
Cool, man.
So where can we find you on social media?
Only Film Noir. Like how you found me. I'm going to be doing some spooky noir, horror noir. A lot of overlap in the horror genre, the noir genre. In fact, and then they sort of become like mishmash together with giallo in Italy. So I'm on Only Film Noir. I've been posting more on Medium. My name's Alex Vlahov, but most people can find me on my Instagram, Only Film Noir.
Awesome. And I had to say, for those of you who are considering following him, he's a really good guy. Like he does like kind of like video, like not video essays, but like essays in like the captions of the photos he captures, and they're really good. He's a writer.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
So that's it for today, folks. You've been listening to the Hit List Podcast. My name is Jason Ramirez. This is season 5, episode 5. And until next time, cross off a new film from your list. Bye.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.